What would you do if you walked into your family's estate and found your powerful father sobbing in the arms of a maid? Would you ask questions or would you assume the worst? That's exactly where this story begins. The Whitmore estate had long been a symbol of power, old wealth, and impeccable control. But on that quiet Wednesday morning, something happened that would shatter the illusion forever. Julian Prescott stormed into the grand marble foyer of the mansion, the soles of his polished Oxfords slapping the floor like a warning shot. He had just flown in from a corporate retreat in Singapore, only to receive a vague text from the house manager. "You should come home. Something's wrong with your father." He hadn't expected this. There, in the center of the lavish sitting room, was his 76-year-old father, Victor Prescott, billionaire tycoon, feared boardroom tactician, crying like a child in the arms of a maid. Not just any maid. Nia Walker, a black woman in her early 30s, known in the household for her quiet grace and relentless work ethic. She was seated on the edge of the leather armchair, cradling Victor as if he were her own. One hand supported his back, the other gently offered him a glass of water. Victor's shoulders were hunched and trembling. His silk robe hung loose over his thin frame. The man looked smaller than Julian had ever seen him. Julian's voice cracked through the air like a whip. "What the hell do you think you're doing with my father, Nia?" She flinched. Not from fear, but from something else. A deep ache that had settled in her bones long before this moment. Nia looked up, her eyes wide, startled. "He wasn't feeling well," she said softly. "He said he was dizzy, and then he started—" "I didn't ask for a story." Julian marched forward, his voice rising. "I asked what the hell you were doing touching my father." Victor stirred, trying to speak. "Julian, wait." But Julian didn't wait. "You think working here gives you the right to put your hands on him?" he barked. "Or were you just hoping he'd forget who you are long enough to make a move?" There it was. The presumption. The poison. Nia's voice trembled. "I wasn't trying to—" He was choking. "I gave him water. I stayed with him so he wouldn't fall." "Oh, please," came another voice from the staircase. A silk robe, a wine glass, and a mask of smug elegance. Liliana Prescott, Victor's second wife and Julian's stepmother, descended the stairs with the grace of a queen. But her eyes told a different story. Calculating, cold. "I've been warning you about her," Liliana said, sipping from her glass. "She's been getting familiar. Alone with him too often, whispering things, touching him." "That's not true," Nia said, rising from the armchair, palms raised. "I would never disrespect Mr. Victor. He's like family to me." "That's rich," Liliana smirked. "A girl from the south side of Chicago claiming she's family to a man who built empires." Julian's jaw tightened. "You've always been too soft, father," he said. "Letting strangers in. This is what it gets you." Victor tried to stand, but his legs wobbled. "Julian, don't do this." But the damage had already been done. Julian stepped forward and, without warning, slapped Nia across the face. The crack echoed across the marble like thunder. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply froze, one tear hanging in the corner of her eye like a secret begging to fall. Victor groaned in protest, but his voice was weak. Julian turned back to Nia. "You want respect? Try earning it instead of crawling into my father's lap like some desperate—" "Stop," Nia whispered hoarsely. Her voice was almost inaudible, but it carried weight. "Please, you don't know what's happening here." "Oh, I know enough," Julian spat. "Pack your things. You're done here. I want you out before sundown." Liliana's smile widened. "Good decision, darling. This house needs cleansing." Nia looked at them both, her face flushed with humiliation, her hands trembling, and then slowly dropped to her knees. She wasn't begging. Not really. She was pleading. For him. For Victor. "Please, don't do this," she said, voice breaking. "He's not okay. I've seen things. I didn't want to say anything, but he didn't want me to stay silent anymore." Liliana's glass paused midair. "Watch your tone." Nia stared at her. I've seen you scream at him. Lock him in his room. Force him to drink wine until he passed out. You sedate him to keep him quiet. Liliana's mask slipped for just a second. You lying little... She's lying, Julian, Liliana cut in sharply. She's desperate and trying to save herself. You heard her. She thinks she's family. Julian hesitated. Something in his chest twisted. He looked at his father, still trembling, still silent, still not denying it. Nia's voice cracked again. Ask him. Just ask him. Liliana grabbed Victor's arm. He needs rest, she said. This whole thing has exhausted him. Let's take him to the lake house. Get away from this toxicity. As she led Victor out of the room, Julian cast one last glance at Nia, still kneeling on the floor. Her lip was bleeding slightly. Her expression was not one of guilt, but of devastation. Sometimes the truth doesn't knock, she said quietly. It bleeds. Julian didn't respond. He followed Liliana and his father through the foyer and out the front doors. But just before they closed behind him, Victor turned back. His eyes found Nia, frail, tired, but filled with something that no one else had shown him in weeks. Regret. A hand lifted, just barely, but it wasn't enough. That night, Nia sat alone in the back servants' corridor, her duffel bag at her side, her cheek still stinging from the slap. But it wasn't the pain that haunted her. It was the silence of a man she had cared for like family, a man whose cries she had dried, whose secrets she had kept, and whose life she knew was in danger. She looked at the estate one last time. The house was still glowing from the inside, full of wealth and laughter, but behind that gold-trimmed glass was rot. She had every reason to walk away, but she didn't. She unlocked the back door and slipped inside. If they wanted silence, they should have fired someone else. Nia Walker had something to show the world, and this time, she wasn't going to whisper. Nia stood in the estate's darkened hallway, her heart pounding like war drums in her chest. Every part of her screamed to turn back, to leave before anyone noticed she hadn't actually left. But she couldn't. Victor Prescott was in danger, and if she didn't do something now, she'd never forgive herself. She moved swiftly through the back quarters, careful not to make a sound. Most of the staff had already ended their shifts. Only a few late-night cleaners remained, and Nia had memorized their routines long ago. She slipped past the kitchen and ducked into a narrow hallway that led to the security room. It was locked. Of course it was. But Nia had cleaned this room too many times not to know where the emergency spare key was hidden, in a small plastic pouch taped under the fire extinguisher panel. Her hands trembled as she retrieved it and slid it into the door. Click. The lights inside flickered on automatically, revealing walls lined with monitors. Dozens of live camera feeds blinked back at her. Hallways, sitting rooms, stairwells, even the private quarters. She pulled the rolling chair closer and sat down. The screen hummed to life as she loaded the backup recordings from the past week. What she saw made her blood run cold. Cam footage showed Liliana late at night, stepping into Victor's room with a bottle of wine, forcing it into his hands. In one clip, she yelled at him so loudly that the sound system clipped the audio. Another clip showed her dragging him, literally dragging him out of his chair and down the hallway by the arm, screaming about documents. Then came the worst of them, a clip from 2 days ago. Liliana screaming, "Sign the damn papers, you old fool, before I lose my patience." Victor's voice was weak. He kept saying, "Where's Julian?" "Please, don't." Nia covered her mouth. She downloaded every clip onto a flash drive, each second more damning than the last. Her hands were shaking, but her heart was steady. This wasn't just about a toxic stepmother anymore. This was abuse, and maybe something even darker. As she turned to leave, a shadow appeared in the doorway. She froze. Julian stood there, his face unreadable. "What are you doing here?" he asked, stepping inside. His tone was sharp but not explosive. Nia clenched the flash drive in her fist. "I had to make sure he was okay. I told you to leave." "I know." He moved closer. "You broke in." "I didn't steal anything," she said quietly. Then she held out the flash drive. "I found something you need to see." Julian didn't take it right away. "What is that?" "Proof," she said. Proof that your stepmother has been abusing your father and trying to steal his estate. Julian's jaw tightened. That's a serious accusation. Then watch it, she said, and ask yourself why your father cries when no one's looking. The silence stretched between them. Then finally Julian reached out and took the drive. The next morning the air in the estate was different, still quiet but charged, like the calm before a thunderstorm. Nia stood outside Victor's suite, holding a breakfast tray. She'd made oatmeal with cinnamon and fresh fruit, Victor's favorite. It was the same thing she used to bring him when the nights got too long, when his memory slipped and he needed something familiar. She knocked gently. "Come in," came the frail but clear voice from inside. Victor was sitting up in bed, his cheeks a little rosier, his eyes more alert than they had been in days. Nia smiled as she stepped in. "Good morning, Mr. Prescott." His eyes lit up. "My angel." She gave a soft laugh. "That's a bit much." "I don't flatter," he said with surprising strength. "I observe." And I remember she set the tray on his bedside table and began adjusting the pillows behind him. "You're too kind," she said. "Do you want me to read after breakfast?" He nodded, then paused. "You saved me, Nia. Not just my health. You brought back my will to fight." Her throat thickened. "No one should be afraid in their own home." A knock interrupted them. Julian stepped in. He wasn't wearing a suit, no tie, no expensive watch, just a soft blue shirt, dark jeans, and a face that looked more like a son than a CEO. "Am I interrupting?" "Only breakfast," Victor said, smiling. "Join us," Nia offered carefully. Julian pulled up a chair but didn't take his eyes off her. "How did he sleep?" "Better," she said. "No nightmares, no restlessness. I think the tension in the house was what made him sick." Julian nodded slowly. "I believe that now." There was a pause, then he looked directly at her. "Nia, I meant what I said last night. I want you to stay, and I want you to have full authority over his care. No more reporting to Liliana. No more orders from household staff. You report only to yourself." She blinked. "Why?" "Because I watched the footage," he said, "and for the first time in a long time, I saw the truth. And the truth was you." She studied his face, measuring his words. "All right," she said softly, "but only if Mr. Prescott wants me here." Victor reached for her hand. "I'd fire my own son if he didn't let you." Julian chuckled faintly. Then his smile faded. "There's something else. I've hired a legal team. If Liliana forged anything, we'll know. And we'll make it right." Nia looked down. "She's not going to go quietly." "I know," Julian said, "but we'll protect you." "I promise." 3 days later, Liliana Prescott was escorted off the property by police. Fraud, coercion, elder abuse. But even with her gone, the shadows lingered. The estate had been silent for too long, and silence leaves stains. Nia found herself wandering the halls, cleaning dust that didn't need to be cleaned, realigning books that hadn't been touched in years. Old habits. She didn't realize she was in the library until her fingers brushed against a thin leather-bound journal wedged between two law books. The cover was cracked, the edges yellowed, but the handwriting was delicate and unmistakable. It was Liliana's. Curiosity prickled her skin. She opened it. Inside were bitter entries, complaints, rants, obsession. But then, something else. A line scribbled in red ink. The deed to the southern vineyard, hidden beneath the floorboards of the East Wing parlor. "He doesn't remember, but I do. That land belongs to me." Nia's pulse quickened. She tucked the journal under her arm and left the library. Minutes later, she stood in the East Wing, a part of the house long closed for asbestos repairs. She knelt down, tapping floorboards one by one until she found the hollow spot. Using a letter opener, she pried the board loose. Inside, wrapped in wax paper, was a deed, stamped and signed by Victor himself over 30 years ago, naming his late wife, Eleanor Prescott, as sole owner of the southern vineyard. Not Liliana. Nia's breath caught. This wasn't just about abuse. It was about rewriting history. She needed to show Julian, now. Julian was in the study, scrolling through emails. She didn't knock. She placed the deed in the journal on the desk. "I found these." He looked up, opened the journal, then the deed, his hands clenched. This is my mother's signature. She never gave that land to Liliana, Nia said, but Liliana was trying to make it look like she did. Julian stared out the window. My mother never trusted her, and now I know why. Then he turned to Nia. You didn't have to do this. I know. You could have stayed quiet. I could have. He looked at her again, this time seeing something new. But you didn't, he said softly. And because of that, everything's about to change. Nia didn't reply, because deep down she already knew. Some truths don't whisper, they scream. And this house was finally listening. The Prescott estate was different now. Not louder, not yet, but the silence no longer felt like a prison. It felt like waiting, like something in the walls was holding its breath, ready for the next revelation. For the first time in weeks, Nia slept without fear of being dragged into the marble foyer and humiliated. But her rest was light, because she knew one thing. Liliana Prescott had not built her web alone. The next morning, Nia carried a tray of tea into Victor's suite. The old man was propped up in bed, sunlight warming his cheeks. He looked stronger, his eyes clearer than they had been in months. You've given me back my dignity, he said quietly as she set the tray down. She smiled. You gave me a reason to fight. Victor reached for her hand. Don't give up on my son. He's learning, but he needs you. Her throat tightened. I'll stay. For you. And for him. Later that afternoon, Julian called Nia into the study. He looked pale but determined. On the desk sat the flash drive, the journal, and the deed she had found. I had the legal team review everything, he said. Liliana forged multiple documents. She siphoned millions through shell charities, and she was planning to sell the southern vineyard before the trust reopened. Nia swallowed hard. She almost got away with it. He leaned forward. But she didn't. Because of you. There was silence between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Then Julian spoke again, his voice lower. I was wrong about you, Nia. About everything. I let my anger speak louder than reason. I can't take back what I did, but I can make something right. He slid a folded letter across the desk. I want you to stay. Not as a maid, as my father's care director, full authority, triple salary. You answer to no one. Nia stared at the letter. This isn't about money for me. I know, Julian said softly. That's why I trust you. For the first time in weeks, she felt something ease in her chest. Not entirely, but enough. That evening, she wandered into the East Gallery, a part of the house she had never dared step into before. And there, hidden beneath a linen cover, she found a painting. She pulled back the cloth and gasped. It was Eleanor Prescott, Victor's late wife, Julian's mother. Her eyes stared out from the canvas, warm, steady, unshakable. Julian entered quietly behind her. She had that portrait commissioned the year before she died, he said. Liliana insisted it be put away. Said it was too painful. Nia touched the frame. It wasn't grief she was hiding. It was erasure. Together, they rehung the portrait in the central hall. No announcement, no fanfare. Just the silent return of the woman whose presence had been stripped from the house. When Victor saw it the next morning, he wept. She's watching again, he whispered. That's enough. But Nia knew it wasn't, because legacies built on silence have a way of fighting back. 2 nights later, she heard footsteps above her quarters, the attic. No one had been assigned to it in years. She crept upstairs, each step groaning beneath her weight. In the attic, among old furniture and forgotten boxes, she found a large leather trunk. Inside were letters tied with a faded ribbon. Her hands shook as she read the first line. My dearest son, if you are reading this, I am no longer able to tell you face to face the things I should have said long ago. It was Eleanor's handwriting, a letter to Julian. The words cut through Nia like lightning. Eleanor had known Liliana was dangerous. She had warned Julian to look beyond ambition, to trust the steady souls, the ones who saw through masks. And then one line stopped Nia cold. Camilla is not who she pretends to be. She came into our lives with charm and calculation. But I learned long ago that love cannot be built on ambition. It must be planted and nurtured. If life gives you a choice between someone who wants your name and someone who sees your soul, choose the latter. Nia pressed the letter to her chest. She didn't hear Julian until he spoke behind her. I thought I heard something. She turned. Your mother left you this. He took the letter, read it slowly, his jaw clenched, his eyes shimmering. I never got to say goodbye to her, he whispered. She died when I was at college. I was too late. Maybe she hid it because she knew Liliana would destroy it, Nia said gently. Julian nodded. She knew. Then he looked at Nia. You're not just saving my father anymore. You're saving me too. For the first time, she saw him not as the furious man who had once struck her, but as a son haunted by silence. The next day, Julian gathered the staff. For years, they had worked in fear, whispering rumors behind closed doors. Now they stood in the grand hall, uncertain. Julian stepped forward, his mother's letter in his pocket. This estate has been ruled by silence, he said, by fear. That ends today. If you see injustice, you speak. If you're mistreated, you come to me directly. From this day forward, we build on integrity, not marble. He turned to Nia. And I want Nia Walker to oversee the transition. She has already proven her loyalty. Gasps rippled through the room. Some nodded. Some looked unsure, but no one dared oppose him. Victor gave a quiet nod of approval from his wheelchair. That night, as Nia sat in the garden with Victor, he whispered, This house was once alive. It feels like it might be again. Nia looked toward the estate, its windows glowing softly against the night sky. For the first time since she had been dragged across the marble floor, she didn't feel invisible. She felt like a guardian. But even as peace began to settle, a shadow remained. Because Liliana's influence had reached further than the estate, into documents, into politics, into people who weren't ready for the truth to be spoken aloud. And soon Nia would discover that exposing one lie was only the beginning. The real fire was still coming.